All right. Let's try this again. All right. History. Sowing. All right. Sowing. Sam Hain looks like, but yes, blame the Irish. They pronounce it Samhain. Okay. 2,000-year-old pagan Celtic festival. That's where we know it comes from. It was brought to the United States in the early 1900s by the Irish immigrants and Scottish immigrants. It was influenced by Feralia. Feralia is a festival of the Romans, and it goes all the way back to the Celts, who were conquered by the Romans in 43 AD. So it goes way back. Both Samhain and Feralia were festivals of the dead celebrated at October's end, and that involved the offering of foods and animal sacrifices. Okay. Today, around 600 AD, really, the Catholic Church moved All Saints' Day, a day to honor the saints and the martyrs, to November 1st to compete with the pagan celebration of the dead. So they thought, well, hey, you know what? They're all celebrating the dead, so let's just move All Saints' Day over next to it so that we can compete with them, so get people to worship this instead. Halloween, though, derives its name from being the day before All Saints' Day. So Hallows Eve was Hallow-Ewen or Halloween, okay? And then around 800 AD, the Catholic Church made November 2nd All Souls' Day to honor martyrs and such for that time. So that's kind of how it grew. And it's believed to be a time when the veil between the dead and the living wanes thin. So the dead are then able to revisit their old haunt, as we get the word haunt, means, the area that you frequent. So you could say, what is your haunt, Kevin? Well, my haunt is, near the area where I hang out and what I do. That's my haunt. It's actually in the scripture, it says they were looking for David and they went to the places where he was known to haunt. Okay? So that's where we get the words haunted, because that's where the spirits go back to visit the place where they used to live. Lighted gourds or pumpkins now, because they switched over, were used to guide the spirits back home. And costumes were used to disguise the people so that the dead wouldn't know who was who, because they wouldn't be able to afflict the living if they couldn't tell who was who. And actually, even bobbing for apples comes from Halloween, because it was a custom that they had, of a way of divining to see who was the next woman who was going to get married. If you could get the apple, congratulations. Yeah. So those are some of the practices that we know of that kind of still spill into today. Jack-o'-lanterns, dressing up in costumes, bobbing for apples, all related to that. It also evolved as tricks and treats and going door to door and so forth. They used to ask for alms. They would do things to do prayers for the dead. And so they would say, if you come and give me something, I'll do prayers for your dead. It had to do with purgatory, I'm sure, because they had to find a way out and so forth. All those customs and traditions that tied over. So many cultures, looking at the origin, many cultures throughout the world celebrate a Day of the Dead. It's interesting because it's not just the Celts, not just the Scottish-Irish, but it's around the world, implying that it has an older origin emanating from a single source. You would think, right? If anything that is a same custom, then now it's everywhere. You have to go, we'll trace it back to where it came from. So here are some examples. In Mexico, they have the Day of the Dead, dating back to the Aztecs and even farther back to the Olmecs. Brazil has a celebration called Finados, which is essentially the Day of the Dead for Brazil. Bolivia, they celebrate the Day of the Skull, which, of course, the same thing. China celebrates the Ghost Festival. Japan, Vietnam, Korea, Nepal, Philippines, they all have similar celebration, and so evidence points to a original source where this came from. So where can we find a source where we know of where something may have happened where from there everyone was dispersed out? Yeah, Tower of Babel in Genesis 10. So if you don't know this story, I know we have time. We don't want to take the time to read it now, but it's that chapter, and it talks about this origin where this guy named Nimrod established a city, called everybody together, and they brought the latest technology, which was making brick. And they said, let's build a tower to heaven. And so it's the first time, this is the first temple. It's a ziggurat, but it's the first temple where since Noah at least, since the flood, I should say at least, where they tried to build a place to access heaven on their own. So as you know from the creation, Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, and the only way back was what God gave them, which at that point was how they should live, keep the animal skin, and so forth. But there was no other way, and so these people said, "Well, we'll make our own way. We can't get back to God. We'll just build it up high enough, and by our own works, we'll get ourselves there." So that's a little bit of the history there of what that was with Nimrod. So, but for our sake of this discussion, all idolatry had its roots in Babel. That was the origin of, we see, where idolatry began. And so this was before the inhabitants were scattered across the earth, because when they were building the tower, God looked down and saw them and said, "Well, this isn't going to work." And he confounded their language by making them speak different languages. He caused them to disperse across the earth. So that's where we get the word Babel today. He's babbling because we can't understand one another. But that's also where we get the city called Babylon. Okay, now Babel has its origin there, where it became Babylon. Babylon was conquered eventually by the Persians, as the scriptures tell us, and then the Babylonian priests are said to have relocated to Pergamum. And then there's more Pergamos in the Bible, and there you read about Pergamos being the place where Satan's seat is, or Satan's throne is. And then Rome, of course, eventually acquired it because the king, Auletus, or something goes, or Auletus, I think his name was, the third, he bequeathed it to Rome at his death. And so they received it. They were kind of revered for their practices and so forth, and the rituals and so forth. And so then Rome acquired that location, and then you start to see this emperor worship being taken in and so forth. So you see the crossover there. But either way, it doesn't matter. It went all over the earth. It wasn't just Rome, but you do see an interesting connection there to Rome and Babel. And if you start reading in your scriptures about the end times, that's also pretty profound. So we go, okay, well, that's all fine. That's history. But how do we look at it today? What is the current culture? What does it say? We've got Halloween. Too many of us, we're just innocent enough about it. I mean, I remember we celebrated. It was a fun time. It was kind of creepy and all that stuff, which kind of what we liked. I used to, peel my old scabs off and glue them back on for Halloween. That was when I was a kid. I was like 10 years old. Yeah. Yeah. I got therapy, but, but, we kind of got into it a little bit. And we still look at it, look at the cute costumes, look what the kids are doing. It's candy. It's fun. It's a fun time. And I really do have some fun memories. My dad once took the church we were attending, and he turned the upper floor, the whole thing, the whole children's church wing into a haunted house, which is all fun and games and kids and stuff. He turned a stairwell all into one big slide. Incredible stuff he did. But it was all just our fun time. So, that's how we kind of look at it. But how does the culture see it? So we're trying to be a light to the world. What does the culture look at? So I thought I said, well, I'll just go and look at what people are saying. So here's a quote from Anton LaVey. Anybody know who Anton LaVey is? You can read it. The founder of the Church of Satan. It is an actual church called the Church of Satan, which does have attendees and is a kind of a growing thing. He says, "I'm glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night out of the year. Welcome to Halloween." So if we think about how others may look at it, in this case, this guy says, hey, this is Satan's holiday. He asserts that dressing up in costumes and coloring oneself during a celebration signifies allowing Satan to own the individual. So he thinks, at least you're giving yourself to the devil this night, effectively dedicating ourselves to the devil's holiday. He considers Halloween a sacred occasion, noting its deep connection to pagan rituals and Satan and worship and so forth. So that's his view of it, and he's the founder of the Church of Satan. Okay. How about in the movies? Halloween's kind of a big time for new movies, isn't it? They kind of schedule the outcome of when these movies are going to come out. Now, we got a lot of adults here. This is good. I don't want to just throw out pictures, but here are some screenshots that they're advertising for movies this year, okay? So we have Bone Lake with a foot there and a bunch of skulls coming up out of the bottom of the lake. Good Boy. I think this is a dog who must protect his owner from supernatural forces if they move to a haunted house. Coyotes, again, you can see it, but it's one of those things where they got to survive by not being eaten to death, whatever. Killing Faith, that was a great name. Killing Faith is now being released. Here's another one called Scurry. They come from below. I think that one, they're trapped underground and they have to escape a bunch of genetically altered spiders. How do they make up this stuff? And then this other one where the face is kind of split says, She Loves Blossoms. Here's VHS Halloween, a skull wrapped in a plastic bag. Black Phone 2 has a Baphomet, which is a symbol for Satan. Shelby Oaks, It Wants Her. And so it goes. There are actually a lot more. There was actually one by the title that I couldn't even list. It was so bad. Like, how do they even post this? How about events within our community? I went online and looked up Lake County events. Here are some of the events I found. Here's a nice parade for Halloween that's coming up in the neighborhood near you. I think this one, I can't remember if this was Round Lake or Lake Villa, or it was close by. The Realm of Terror Haunted House. Have you seen the advertisements for it? Is that the one that's the greatest, the most? Yeah, this is the most popular one in the United States, I believe. Huh? Illinois, in Illinois, and the most popular one in Illinois. There was another one I had a photo for. I don't know, maybe it's in here. The one with the green woman. You got rid of that. There's this green woman, creepy looking thing. I see that every day on the way to church because it's on the billboard as I'm coming down 45 going north. There's a Day of the Dead celebration around Lake Beach. There's a Night of 1,000 jack-o'-lanterns, which I thought, well, that's just going to be a bunch of nice pumpkins all carved up. But the picture that they have there kind of says a little different picture, a different story of the skull kind of woman, rotted face kind of thing. Now, here's another one, the Circle Camp 2025. This is a 3-day pagan camping event. I mean, a full-on 3-day pagan camping event where they go and they practice pagan rituals for 3 days and on a camp out in a fireplace. In a place. And I found this looking up Lake County events, but someone corrected me and said they think this is Ohio. Okay, but there are places like this. Minnesota is known for a increasing. You would think maybe up in New England or something like that, but Minnesota is like the hotbed of paganism. There's a whole area up there called Paganistan. And, we kind of laugh, but they named it Paganistan because of all the people that are gathering there to practice and share their pagan knowledge and witchcraft and druidism and sorceries and all the kind of stuff that they're trying to do. So, Osage Hills State Park is where this Circle Camp is, so you can find out where that is. But it's they celebrate Samhain, a major pagan and Wicca holiday, and that's the way they advertise it. So Paganistan, though, up in Minnesota, and some estimate that paganism is the fastest growing religion in America right now. I think it'd be hard to really calculate that, but that's because you can believe it. Because if you look at the reason why they go that way, well, some of it, I guess, is because of the New Age kind of views and this whole save the earth and the earth it being basically a deity of its own and how we worship it. And even the whole idea of it's being about ourselves and our emotions and how we feel and expressing all that all ties back into this cult worship. I could spend more time describing that, but we'll save it. So also there's a 27th annual Living History Tour of the Grays Lake Cemetery, which I think is more of a history tour of Grays Lake and telling you what different people made different contributions to Grays Lake. But of course, they wanted to run this during the time of the season of Halloween because they understand the audience. Planetarium show, Halloween's celestial origins in the planetarium. I think this might be kind of interesting if you're interested in knowing some of the pagan roots of it and how it's tied to like Zoroastrianism or these other celestial worship things. And so I'd be interested to see what they say. It's information which could be good, but still you can see how they're tying in Halloween to this astrology and such. Here's another one, Wolf Hollow Witches Market. That's in, where is it? Wolf Hollow, which is on Route 76 in Belvedere, Illinois. And so by the picture you see, the hands and the moon and so forth, they're, I doubt it's much more than some kind. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's a witch's market. I don't know. They could be selling potions for all I know, but that's what they call it, a witch's market. And of course, Six Flags has the Fright Fest. Okay. And right down here in Waukegan, they have Zombie Walk. And this is off their own, this is off Lake County's site, right? These are all these photos and listings are from. So here, dress up your little girl as a dead person. That sounds like a great way to celebrate a holiday. Yeah, but that's what they're doing. Okay. So what does the Bible say about it, though? That's really what we want to know, right? What does the Bible say about it? Well, there's nothing in there that says directly Halloween, of course, because it's not a specific thing. But if we see where it comes from and its roots and so forth, we can look at some things. We know some of the things that are practiced during the time. I don't know, it was in the 60s when one of these toy companies came out with a specific toy that they started selling, and it really changed the shape of America greatly. Because people were starting to use this little thing where they put their hand on it and they're thinking, well, what powers this thing? What's making this move? But it was actually a toy you could buy for kids and so forth. It was called a Ouija board. Okay. So it's divining and spells and curses and all this type of thing is all is described in Scripture. So we can look at some of that. So I'm going to go through Deuteronomy 18, 9 to 14. This is a pretty typical one when you're having this discussion about Halloween, okay? It says, when thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. So he's telling the Jews that are coming into the land, look, I'm going to give you your own land, deliver you from Egypt, bring you into your own land. When you go there, don't start living like everybody else does. Going on. There shall not be found among you anyone that makes his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that uses divinations, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch. All these things are associated with paganism, and actually, in some form or fashion, I don't think anybody's passing children through the fire at Halloween. I sure hope not, but since we know that there is a Church of Satan, and there are all different cult things that do take place, I'm not going to say there isn't. But that was a practice back in the day. But using divinations definitely is stuff that we know people do. Observer of times, I think we're talking about astrology or divining things through these celestial bodies. An enchanter or a witch, we're familiar with this is. Or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits. So consulting these, they have this connection and they find this spirit that's going to speak to you, like the Ouija board, or a wizard, or a necromancer, which is speaking to the dead. Okay? For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because of these things, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. So it's like, because they are pagans, because they're doing these things, that's why I'm giving the land to you. You're supposed to go in and remove all these people because they're an abomination to me. That's why I've called you. So if we think about it, how he's called us and what is our job to do in the earth today as we live. So he says, thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. And then the next one, for these nations which thou shalt possess, hearken unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee to do. So that's how we should live. We should not be living those things. If we went through the works of the flesh, we would see it also talks about witchcraft and so forth as well. 1 Corinthians 10:20 says, but I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God, and I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. So again, it was putting it in context and so forth. He's talking about, let's just make sure we understand there's how we should live and how the lost people live, and there has to be a separation between. Okay, Ephesians 5, we're going to read 8 to 14. It says, for you were sometimes darkness, but now are ye light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. So where do we find the Spirit? But in all the good things in life. Proving what is acceptable unto the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. So in this case, he's saying, don't live after those unfruitful things of darkness. Don't try to, don't glorify them, but reprove them. Call them out for what they are. For it is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret, but all things that are reproved are made manifest by the light, and whatsoever doth make manifest is light. So if we want to be light, we have to, in order to be light, we have to make manifest. If we're not making things manifest, we're not light. We're supposed to be the light of the world. Okay. Wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. I thought that was a great verse to add in. Awake thou that sleepest, arise from the dead, and God shall give thee light. It's a time where they're celebrating the death, the dead, the day of the dead, and so forth. You know, when it says wake thou that sleepest, I was reading in another spot where I was in Zechariah, but when the prophet Zechariah was in his vision that the angel came to reveal something to him, and it says he became as one that was awoken. So this whole concept of awaking is like coming to a new revelation. You see things differently. It's like the transition from being asleep to being awake, from what your state of consciousness and awareness of what's around you to what it is when you're awake. That's what it was when the prophet saw what God gave him. It was all of a sudden he's like snapped to awakeness. All this time I've been asleep. How did I not see this? Kind of a thing. And so that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be as though that are awakened out of our sleep and are rising from the dead. And then he'll give us light. And we already said that if we're going to be light, we have to make manifest. Okay, so this is just a bit of what, how I would see it. And I look at it as like, well, I know how I would want to look at it, but how does the world look at it? What's happening in the world? How are we going to be separate from the world and so forth? And so then I think, well, then what do we do this time of year? What is our response as Christians? What should we do? Well, I think what I like to do is think about what are the opportunities that we have through Halloween. So we can think about some of the ways that we might have opportunities, okay? The Bible does tell us, it says, redeem the time, for the days are evil. So we do want to look for ways to make use of what is going on around us to help to share the gospel and so forth. And so one thing I like to do is remind my kids. I say, look, it's Halloween. All these kids are wanting to do these things, dress up. They want to go door to door. They're going to try to, invite you to the parties and all this stuff. But kids, it's not our holiday, okay? It's an unholiday, actually, because holiday means holy day. So it's an unholiday, and we don't celebrate unholidays. We celebrate holidays, okay? And I think there's a good time. It's great that you can find opportunities and use them to be able to say to kids, there's nothing wrong at all with letting your kids know we're just not like everybody else. We're not looking down on people. We're not judging them. We're not trying to make ourselves seem like we're better than they are. The fact is, though, that God does call us with a calling, and he wants to be the sheep among the goats. And there are times when we just have to realize we don't do what everybody else does. And if I can teach my kids that at a young age, then I know that's going to help me all the way through life as they're growing up. Okay, so that's one thing we can do. Another thing is there is somebody who did conquer sin and death. And it could be an opportunity for us to share with people as they're thinking about death and mesmerized. And well, people have a lot of questions and thoughts about it. And that's why it's kind of such a dark mystery, and why they're curious to try to look into it and see what they can find out and see what might be there. But there are answers, and we know what these answers are. And we know that we don't have to go to these sources to find the answers. We can go to Christ to find the answers. And so as people are looking for these things and trying to look into them and they're curious, you say, well, what is it you're looking for? What is it you're trying to find out? Well, whatever it is, I want to go to a soothsayer, a palm reader. I want to, whatever it is, so you can find out, well, what is it? Because Christ has that answer. And so it gives you an opportunity to share with them. One thing that we would like to do, we got to arrange this, but I thought, kids are always coming to our door. Anyway, for candy, we can either shut everything off and put no soliciting, we don't celebrate Halloween, go away. Or we could use it to give them bags with candy in it, but have a track in it that says, Jesus died for your sins and something like that, the invitation to the church in it and so forth, where you can invite them out. You give them something that they want, maybe erasers and pencils or whatever, but you can include something else in there too if you don't like to give them candy like I don't. Okay, so that might be an opportunity. But there's also something else. You can give them an alternative to it altogether, such as the Harvest Fest. Yes. And so this will be our last slide here. But yes, for the Harvest Fest, it is an alternative. It's an alternative to Halloween. A lot of people are looking for something to do, some activity. But with that comes all the other baggage of Halloween. They're looking for a fun time. They want the sweets and all that stuff, whatever, because kids all love that. But there is something better that you can offer them. And the church is providing that for us all so that we have that opportunity. And so here's a great opportunity that we have when we want to be able to share a light to go invite people to our church's Harvest Fest, which is my little segue into the commercial. Yes, Harvest Fest this Saturday. Invite your guests and friends. Amen. Any questions, comments? The microphone is open.